Sunday school continues. Now we are in Genesis chapter 39. In Genesis chapter 39, we're going to read about how Joseph got into Egypt. So, from the previous chapters, we know Joseph has been sold by his own brothers to the Ishmaelite merchants to Egypt. And when they got to Egypt, they sold Joseph as a slave to Potiphar, the head of King Pharaoh's guard. So we're going to read in the New International Version and see. Chapter 39 verse 1 says, Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. In verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. So here, the Bible is still saying the Lord was with Joseph. This was what his brothers didn't understand. Because he dreamt a mere dream and shared those dreams with them, they grew jealous. And the second reason for their jealousy was because their dad loved him. They didn't want to see reason why their dad loved him and sold him a coat of many colors. But in this life, whoever has the backing of God, no man can challenge. You can do your worst in your own way. But when God says it's enough, it's indeed enough. You will never get close. So let's read ahead and see. In verse 3, when his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, that is still Joseph they are talking about. Potiphar saw that God was with Joseph because everything Joseph did, there was success. In verse 4, Joseph found favor in the eyes of his master and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. So you see, even Potiphar as a human being noticed that God was with Joseph, because he noticed everything Joseph was doing was successful, and he decided to put him in charge of his house. Everything that Potiphar owned, he entrusted it in Joseph's care. And in verse 4, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge. In verse 5, from the time he put him in charge of his household and all that belongs to him, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. So you see, Potiphar observed this boy. He came as a foreigner, but he noticed everything Joseph was doing was successful. So he decided to draw him closer to him and put him in charge of everything that he owns. And because of that singular act, God blessed Potiphar too. This is another lesson we should learn as Christians. When you notice that this person has the grace or the favor of God, draw that person close by, and you will experience more blessings, more grace. That was what happened exactly to Joseph and Potiphar. But when this is happening, whenever you are going up the ladder of success, of breakthrough, always be conscious that the devil is not happy. He will come looking for you, and you have to be strong. It doesn't mean when you have the backing of God, nothing, no challenge will come. Nothing negative will come your way. That is the time you will stand strong for that negativity. Stand strong and continue to be faithful, to be righteous, to be in the presence of your God. Because he will fight the unseen battles for you. This is what is happening to Joseph. Now in verse 6, So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care, with Joseph in charge. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. This is where the challenge is coming, because he was well built, he was handsome, he had the fear of God in him, he has got favor in the sight of his master because God is with him. Verse 7, and after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. This is the devil using that woman against Joseph. But sometimes these are things we should not forget that will happen. Trials, temptation, but this was a temptation for that woman, the servant of your husband, and you lure him to have an affair with you. That was a trial for Joseph. A temptation for Joseph. But did Joseph give in? Let's go along and see. In verse 8, but he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. That was Joseph's response. How could I do a thing like that to betray my master? He has entrusted everything in my care because he trusts me. Why should I betray his trust and go to bed with you, his wife, his beloved wife? So Joseph refused, and that was the reason he gave to the woman, that he could not do that. In verse 9, no one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. So Joseph was referring to the woman. So my master has given me access to everything in this house. Only you. Because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? So you see, whoever has the fear of God in them, whenever temptation comes their way, they are going to reason it in their head and come out with a positive response. I can't do that. Look at what is happening to me. Look at what this man has been doing to me. He has given me access to everything except you, his wife. If I go to bed with you, that is sinful, and that will be a bad idea on my own side. I can't do that. In verse 10, and though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. So you see, this woman did not relent. That's what the devil does. 24 hours round the clock. He's planning. He's still working. No matter what you fight it, he will not relent. So we too should not relent. In taking our stand in the presence of God, and he will be with us. So in verse 11, one day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. That was what Joseph did. So in verse 12, she caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. So you see, the woman was still looking for an opportunity to make sure Joseph yielded to her demand. So she waited for that day that no domestic staff was around. It was just her and Joseph. Who knew? Maybe she sent all the other domestic staff on errand so that they will not be around, because she has planned it well. She has planned it the way she wants it to go. But you see, Joseph stood his ground. She waited until Joseph went into that house to do his domestic work. And she found out they were in a confined area. And she grabbed Joseph by his shirt. They called it cloak. But Joseph just took it off and left it with her and ran away. And Joseph running away, let's see what happened. In verse 13, when she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. Now she changed the narrative of the story. She was the one seducing the boy. But because the boy couldn't do it, he ran away and left his shirt. So he said, this is a good evidence to show him he is not smart. I am the smartest. And she called the other domestic servant and showed them Joseph's clothes. That this is what is the evidence. He came into my room to sleep with me. He is an Hebrew. He came here to us Egyptians, and he wants to make sport of us. That was her word. And in verse 15, when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. That's the woman still explaining to the other domestic staff that because she screamed, Joseph ran away and left his cloak with her. And that was not the truth. Verse 16, she kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. Now, Potiphar's wife is reporting to him that this is what Joseph did. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So you see, Potiphar has been watching this boy, that God is with him, and has given him position. Why now the wife complained about him, making those serious allegations to him about Joseph, and he never waited, asked to listen to Joseph's side of the story. He straight away went ahead and meted out punishment for him by sending him to prison. But you see, in this life, what the enemy meant evil for you might be good for you. As the chorus goes, what the enemy meant for evil, God has turned it around. He has turned it around. And that was what happened exactly in the life of Joseph. Potiphar's wife allowed the devil to use her against Joseph, only to get rid of their house, to be elevated to another higher level. But before he goes to that higher level, he was in prison. Let's go ahead and see. From Potiphar's house to prison, the next P is coming. Let's watch out for that. Very interesting story. So we go ahead and read verse 21. The Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So you see, wherever Joseph goes, he finds favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put him in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. Verse 23, the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Who God has blessed, no man can curse, no man can stop, no man can reduce to nonsense. You can only do your worst to show the world that you are not good. But that person you are trying to label bad will never be labeled bad, because as long as the Lord is with that person, God knows Joseph. He's been showing him those dreams wherever he's going, even in these times of trials. He's been given leadership positions. Joseph came to Potiphar's house. Potiphar placed him in charge. That's leadership position. The wife came to tempt him, and he declined, and she got angry, lied against him. He was sent to prison. In the prison too, he had the favor of God. The prison warden put him in charge, and he will never check because he trusted Joseph and knew the Lord was with him. Joseph never cried. He never complained and said, God, if you are with me, why are you allowing all this, me going through all this mess? He never complained. As a Christian, we should learn this. Some challenges, trials, tribulations, temptations, you name them, all will come your way when God is preparing that way for you to climb to that ladder of success, of victory, of breakthrough, of deliverance. Keep the faith. God is with you. In Jesus' name.